The massive crystal warship broke through the defensive line like it was made of paper. Admiral Zex Thor watched in horror as his most powerful weapons bounced harmlessly off its gleaming surface. The ship's crystalline structure simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger, its purple-tinted surface pulsing with stolen power. "Fire everything," he ordered, knowing it was useless. His crew, the best in the Galactic Alliance's Third Fleet, followed his command without hesitation. A storm of plasma bolts, energy beams, and quantum torpedoes lit up space around the Krethak vessel. When the barrage ended, the enemy ship was actually larger than before. "Admiral," his second-in-command whispered, "we should retreat while we still can." Zex Thor's 4 hearts sank as he gave the order to fall back. In his 30 cycles of service, he had never retreated. But the Krethak left no choice. Their crystalline bodies and ships were simply invincible. 3 days later, in the Great Council Chamber of the Galactic Alliance, representatives from 50 advanced civilizations gathered in emergency session. The room buzzed with fear and desperation as holographic displays showed the Krethak's unstoppable advance across Alliance space. High Chancellor Mira, her green scales dulled with exhaustion, addressed the assembly. "In the past month, we have lost contact with 12 worlds. The Krethak are not just defeating us. They are humiliating us. Our most advanced weapons make them stronger. Our shields cannot stop them. Our fastest ships cannot escape them." A representative from the Techmarch Collective stood up, his mechanical body whirring. "We have analyzed their crystal structure at the quantum level. They can instantly repair any damage. Energy weapons are worse than useless. They absorb the power and grow stronger. We have tried everything in our scientific arsenal." "Not everything," came a quiet voice from the back. All eyes turned to Dr. Lurax, the Alliance's chief xenobiologist. She was known for her unusual ideas. "Explain," ordered the High Chancellor. Dr. Lurax's tentacles twisted nervously as she spoke. "There is one species we haven't consulted. A quarantined race from a high-gravity world. They're considered primitive by our standards, but they have a unique way of solving problems." Murmurs of confusion filled the chamber. "You can't mean," began one representative. "Yes," said Dr. Lurax. "The humans." The chamber erupted in protests. Humans were quarantined for a reason. They were unpredictable, violent, and their solutions often seemed insane to civilized species. But they had also achieved spaceflight in record time and survived multiple near-extinction events. High Chancellor Mira raised her hand for silence. "The Krethak have taken 12 worlds. They will take 12 more before the month ends. We have tried everything else." She turned to Dr. Lurax. "Tell us about these humans." Dr. Lurax activated a holographic display showing a small blue-green planet, Earth. "Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They still use combustion engines and physical projectiles. But," she paused for effect, "they excel at destroying things that seem indestructible." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were the most advanced civilizations in known space, reduced to asking primitives for help. But as another alert showed a 13th world going dark, they knew they had no choice. High Chancellor Mira made the decision that would change the galaxy forever. "Prepare a first contact team. We're going to Earth." The crystalline invaders continued their advance, unaware that their greatest challenge would come from a species that hadn't even mastered faster-than-light travel. Sometimes, the most primitive solution is the most effective one. Dr. Sarah Chen was having a perfectly normal Tuesday morning in her materials science lab at MIT when the aliens arrived. Their ship descended from the clouds like a giant silver teardrop, landing gracefully on the university's main lawn. The world watched in stunned silence as humanity made first contact with extraterrestrial life. 24 hours later, she found herself in a hastily organized emergency meeting at the United Nations, surrounded by the world's top scientists and military leaders. The alien delegation, led by a green-scaled being called High Chancellor Mira, had just finished explaining about the unstoppable crystalline species threatening the galaxy. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said, trying not to laugh. "These Krethak are basically living crystals." "Yes," replied the High Chancellor, all four of her eyes blinking in confusion at Sarah's reaction. "Their molecular structure instantly repairs itself. Energy weapons only make them stronger. They are invincible." Sarah couldn't hold back anymore. She burst out laughing. The room fell silent. The military generals looked embarrassed, the other scientists uncomfortable. The alien delegation seemed utterly baffled. "I'm sorry." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "But have you tried hitting them with a hammer?" The High Chancellor's translator took a moment to process this. "A hammer? You mean a primitive striking tool?" "Well, yeah." Sarah stood up and walked to the whiteboard. "Look, crystals are incredibly strong in some ways, but they have natural planes of weakness. Hit them right. And..." She drew a diagram, then erased it with one swipe. "They shatter." "Impossible," said one of the alien scientists, his mechanical body whirring as he moved forward. "We have tried physical weapons. They repair themselves instantly." "At what frequency?" Sarah asked. "Frequency? Yeah, like how fast do you hit them? Everything has a resonant frequency. Hit something at just the right frequency, and you can shatter it no matter how strong it is. It's basic materials science." The alien delegation stared at her in silence. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. "In all our centuries of advancement, we never considered simply hitting them repeatedly at the right speed." Sarah shrugged. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Give me a week in my lab with a sample of their crystal structure, and I bet I can design something that'll shake them apart." The military generals were now leaning forward with interest. One raised his hand. "Could we modify existing sonic weapons for this?" "Better than that." Sarah grinned. "We can turn construction equipment into weapons. Jackhammers, sonic drills, even modified speakers playing at the right frequency. If these Krethak have never encountered mechanical vibration weapons before, they won't have any defense against them." The High Chancellor turned to her advisors, speaking rapidly in their own language. After a moment, she faced Sarah again. "Dr. Chen, would you be willing to lead a team to develop these primitive weapons?" Sarah's grin widened. "Chancellor, I've spent my whole career studying how things break. This is literally my dream job." As the meeting continued, word spread quickly through the alien delegation. The primitive humans, barely out of their planetary cradle, might have found a way to defeat the invincible Krethak. Not with advanced energy weapons or sophisticated shields, but with the equivalent of rhythm and hammers. Sometimes, you don't need a super weapon to win a war. Sometimes, all you need is the right tool and the wisdom to use it. The Galactic Alliance's most advanced battleship, the Starseeker, had never carried such strange cargo before. Its loading bay was filled with what the aliens considered primitive tools: jackhammers, sonic drills, modified construction equipment, and huge speakers. Among these devices walked Dr. Sarah Chen and her team of engineers, making final adjustments to their equipment. "I still can't believe we're going to fight an advanced alien species with construction tools," said Mike Rodriguez, Sarah's chief engineer, as he calibrated a massive speaker system. Sarah patted the modified jackhammer she'd been working on. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Besides, we've improved them quite a bit." The alien crew watched in confusion as the humans tested their equipment. To them, the loud, mechanical devices seemed barbaric compared to their sleek energy weapons. But after seeing every advanced weapon fail against the Krethak, they were willing to try anything. Admiral Zexthor approached the human team. "We've detected a small Krethak patrol ship ahead. It will be a good test of your methods." Sarah nodded, checking the readings on her tablet. "Perfect. Time to show these crystal cowboys what Earth brings to the party." The Starseeker dropped out of faster-than-light travel near an abandoned mining outpost. As predicted, a single Krethak ship was patrolling the area. Its purple-tinted crystalline surface gleamed in the starlight. "They're scanning us," reported the sensor officer. Sarah grinned. "Let's give them a welcome they'll never forget." "Mike, fire up the bass cannons." The modified speakers, now mounted on the ship's exterior, began pumping out sound waves at exactly the right frequency to match the Krethak's crystal structure. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then tiny cracks appeared on the enemy ship's surface. "It's working," shouted Mike. "The vibrations are disrupting their crystal matrix." The Krethak ship tried to return fire, but its energy weapons were useless against the purely mechanical attack. More cracks spread across its surface like a spiderweb. "They're trying to adjust their crystal structure," said Sarah, watching the readings. Mike switched to frequency pattern beta. The sound waves changed pitch. The cracks on the Krethak ship grew larger. Pieces of crystal began breaking off and floating away into space. Inside the enemy ship, the crystalline warriors were experiencing something entirely new: fear. Their bodies, usually impervious to all attacks, were vibrating painfully. Some of them began developing cracks in their crystal forms. The Krethak ship tried to retreat, but it was too late. With a sound like breaking glass that no one in space could hear, the vessel shattered into thousands of glittering pieces. The bridge of the Starseeker erupted in cheers. Admiral Zexthor stared in amazement at the debris field that had once been an invincible Krethak ship. "Impossible," he whispered. "You destroyed them with noise." "Not just noise," Sarah corrected him. "The right noise, at the right frequency, with the right power behind it. Simple physics, really." Word of the victory spread quickly through the Galactic Alliance. The unstoppable Krethak had finally been stopped, not by advanced energy weapons or sophisticated shields, but by humans with modified construction equipment. As the Starseeker's crew celebrated, Sarah was already working on improvements to their weapons. "Next time," she told Mike, "we'll bring the jackhammers. I want to see what happens when we get up close and personal with these crystal creatures." For the first time in years, the galaxy had hope. The primitive humans and their primitive tools were about to change the course of the war. The Krethak commander Zixtol stood before the broken remains of what had once been his finest warrior. The crystalline soldier had been shattered into hundreds of pieces, each fragment still trying desperately to reform but failing. "How?" he demanded, his crystalline form vibrating with rage. "How did these primitives do this?" The science officer's report was disturbing. The humans, they didn't use energy weapons. They used pure mechanical force, targeted vibrations that matched our resonant frequency. "We've never encountered anything like it." Across the galaxy, more reports were coming in. Human teams, equipped with what they called sonic weapons, were breaking Krethak forces apart piece by piece. The species that had never known defeat was learning the taste of fear. On the Alliance battleship Starseeker, Dr. Sarah Chen was teaching alien engineers how to build their own sonic weapons. "The key is to hit them at exactly the right frequency," she explained, pointing to a diagram. "Too slow, and it won't affect them. Too fast, and they can adapt." Mike Rodriguez burst into the room, holding a tablet. "Sarah, you need to see this. The Krethak are trying to change their crystal structure." Sarah grabbed the tablet, studying the new data. The enemy was attempting to alter their molecular pattern to resist the sonic attacks. A smile spread across her face. "They don't get it, do they?" she said. "Every crystal structure has a breaking point. They're just giving us new frequencies to work with." The next battle proved her right. When the Krethak attacked with their modified crystal forms, Sarah's team simply adjusted their sonic weapons to match the new resonant frequencies. The result was even more devastating than before. "They're running," shouted an Alliance officer as the Krethak fleet retreated. The sight of crystalline ships shattering into space dust had become common, but it never got less impressive. Admiral Zexthor watched from the bridge, shaking his head in amazement. "In all my years, I never thought I'd see the Krethak flee from battle." "Your people have achieved the impossible," Dr. Chen. Sarah was already working on her next invention. Not impossible, Admiral. Just basic science. Although she held up a small device that looked like a regular hammer. Wait until you see what we're working on next. We call it the resonance hammer. It detects the crystal structure of whatever it hits and automatically adjusts its impact frequency. The news spread through the Alliance. The invincible Krethak were no longer invincible. Human ingenuity had found their weakness, and now every construction site in Alliance space was being converted into a weapon factory. Back in their territory, the Krethak High Command faced an uncomfortable truth. Their species, which had evolved to be the perfect warriors, had a fatal flaw. And the primitives, the humans they had dismissed as barely worth noticing, had found it. We must strike at their homeworld, Zixtal declared. Destroy these humans before they can spread their weapons further. But as the Krethak prepared their largest fleet for an assault on Earth, they didn't know that Sarah Chen and her team had been preparing for exactly this moment. Let them come, she told the Alliance Council. We've got a surprise waiting for them. Something that will shake their whole world apart. The war had reached its turning point, and the galaxy watched in anticipation as the unstoppable force prepared to meet humanity's immovable determination. The Krethak thought they had found the answer. Their scientists had spent weeks restructuring their crystalline bodies into a new, more complex pattern. The human sonic weapons wouldn't work anymore, or so they believed. They were wrong. The battle began in orbit around Colony World 7. The Krethak arrived with their newly modified fleet, crystals arranged in intricate patterns that they thought would resist any frequency. Dr. Sarah Chen watched them approach from the bridge of the Star Seeker. Interesting pattern, she said, studying the readings, but they still don't understand the basics of material science. Mike Rodriguez nodded as he worked at his console. They just made themselves more brittle. Want to show them their mistake. Light them up, Sarah ordered with a grin. The Alliance fleet, now equipped with humanity's latest sonic weapons, opened fire. The Krethak ships started vibrating as the sound waves hit them. But instead of shattering immediately, they held together. Commander Zixtal allowed himself a moment of triumph. See, their primitive weapons no longer work. Then Sarah pressed a button on her tablet. The sonic weapons changed frequency, adapting to the new crystal structure. Cracks appeared in the Krethak ships, spreading faster than ever before. The more complex the crystal, Sarah explained to the amazed Alliance crew, the more ways it can break. They just gave us more weak points to target. The battle turned into a slaughter. Krethak ships shattered left and right, their new crystal structure proving even more vulnerable than the old one. Their warriors, modified in the same way, found themselves literally falling to pieces. Retreat, Zixtal ordered, watching his fleet disintegrate. Fall back to secondary positions. But Sarah wasn't done yet. As the Krethak turned to flee, she unveiled her latest invention. Mike, activate the resonance field. A wave of precisely tuned vibrations spread out from the Alliance fleet, catching the retreating Krethak ships. The effect was devastating. Ships that had survived the initial attack couldn't withstand the new weapon. They broke apart in seconds, their complex crystal patterns proving to be their downfall. Back on the Krethak homeworld, the High Command received the news with horror. Their greatest fleet, equipped with their most advanced crystal configuration, had been destroyed in minutes. How? One commander asked. How do these primitives keep defeating us? The answer was simple, though they couldn't see it. While the Krethak had spent centuries developing ever more complex crystal structures, humans had spent those same centuries learning how things break. On the Star Seeker, Sarah was already working on her next project. Every time they change their structure, they give us new weaknesses to exploit, she explained to Admiral Zexthor. It's like they're doing our research for us. The Admiral watched as his crew celebrated their biggest victory yet. When we first contacted Earth, we thought we were reaching out to primitives, he admitted. We never imagined that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Sarah finished with a smile. That's the thing about humans, Admiral. We might not have the most advanced technology, but we understand the fundamentals really well. As repair crews cleaned up the debris field of shattered crystal ships, word spread through the galaxy. The Krethek's latest attempt to counter human ingenuity had failed spectacularly, but everyone knew this wasn't over yet. Somewhere in their territory, the Krethek were preparing for their final desperate gamble. They were coming for Earth itself. Earth's skies were filled with construction crews and engineers. They weren't building skyscrapers or bridges. They were installing the largest sound system in human history. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on top of the Empire State Building, watching teams mount massive speakers on every tall building in sight. "How's the installation going?" Mike Rodriguez asked through her earpiece. He was coordinating teams in Tokyo. "Right on schedule," Sarah replied, checking her tablet. "Every major city is becoming one big resonance weapon. If the Krethek want to attack Earth, they're in for one hell of a concert." The Alliance's early warning systems had detected the largest Krethek fleet ever assembled heading straight for Earth. The crystalline warriors had decided to eliminate the source of their problems once and for all. They had no idea what was waiting for them. 3 days later, the Krethek fleet appeared in Earth's solar system. Thousands of crystal ships, led by Commander Zixtal himself, emerged from faster-than-light travel near Mars. "Look at their primitive defenses," Zixtal sneered, seeing the speakers mounted on Earth's buildings. "They think they can defeat our entire fleet with sound waves." His science officer seemed less confident. "Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy patterns across the planet's surface. They'd done something to their atmosphere." Sarah Chen stood in the Global Defense Center beneath New York City, surrounded by screens showing the approaching fleet. "They're entering the resonance field," she announced. "Time to show them why you don't mess with Earth. Mike, start the sequence." Around the world, the massive speaker systems powered up. But they weren't just speakers. Each one was part of a planet-wide network designed to turn Earth's atmosphere into one giant resonance chamber. The Krethek fleet entered Earth's atmosphere confidently, expecting an easy victory. Then the music started. It wasn't just any music. Sarah's team had calculated the exact frequencies needed to shatter every known variation of Krethek crystal structure. The sound waves bounced off the atmosphere, amplified by the global network, creating a symphony of destruction. "Impossible!" Zixtal screamed as his ships began breaking apart. The carefully coordinated sound waves were coming from every direction, leaving no safe angle of approach. How can they have turned their entire planet into a weapon? In the defense center, Sarah watched as the Krethek fleet literally fell to pieces. Crystalline ships shattered like glass sculptures dropping on concrete. The few ships that tried to retreat found their engines too damaged to escape Earth's gravity. "Should we pursue the survivors?" an Alliance admiral asked. Sarah shook her head. "No need. Let them go. Let them tell others what happens when you attack Earth." The battle was over in less than an hour. Earth's skies were filled with falling crystal shards, creating the most spectacular light show in human history. News channels called it the Crystal Rain. As the dust settled, the galaxy received an unmistakable message. Humanity might be primitive by some standards, but they were far from helpless. They had turned their entire planet into a defensive weapon, using nothing more complex than speakers and sound waves. In the debris field above Earth, a single Krethek escape pod transmitted a message to their homeworld. The words were simple but carried enormous weight. "Earth is protected. The humans have won." But Sarah Chen, watching the crystal fragments twinkle in the sunlight, had a different thought. This wasn't just about winning. It was about what came next, and she had plans for that too. 1 month after the Crystal Rain, the Galactic Alliance's Grand Council chamber was packed with representatives from every member species. They had gathered to witness something unprecedented, a peace delegation from the Krethek. The crystalline ambassadors entered nervously, their forms dulled and simplified. They had reverted to their most basic crystal structure to appear less threatening. At their head walked Supreme Commander Zixtal, once their greatest warrior, now their chosen peace envoy. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the human section, watching with interest. Next to her, Mike Rodriguez whispered, "Never thought I'd see the day when the Krethak would come asking for peace. Asking for mercy, more like it." Another delegate muttered, "We should shatter them all." Sarah shook her head. "That's not the human way. Not anymore." High Chancellor Mira called the session to order. "Supreme Commander Zixtal, you have requested this audience. Speak." The crystalline commander's voice was humble, a stark change from his previous arrogance. "The Krethak Empire stands on the brink of collapse. Our fleets are shattered. Our colonies in chaos. We come to seek terms, to beg for our survival." Murmurs filled the chamber. Many species wanted revenge for worlds lost to Krethak aggression. Some called for their complete destruction. Then Sarah Chen stood up. "If I may address the council," she asked. When Mira nodded, Sarah walked to the center of the chamber. "We humans have a long history of war," she began. "But we also have a history of turning enemies into friends. The Krethak aren't evil. They're just different. Their crystal nature made them nearly invincible, so they never learned to cooperate or compromise." She turned to face Zixtal. "But now they have learned what it means to be vulnerable. To need help. That's not a weakness. It's an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" someone called out. Sarah smiled. "For growth. For change. The same properties that make their crystal structures perfect for warfare could be used for art, for music, for construction. Imagine Krethak crystal architects helping to build new worlds. Imagine their resonant frequencies being used to create symphonies instead of weapons." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Even the Krethak delegates seemed stunned by this vision of their future. "The humans could have destroyed us," Zixtal admitted. "Instead, they offer us a new purpose." "That's what humans do best," Sarah replied. "We don't just solve problems. We find new possibilities." Over the next few hours, the terms were negotiated. The Krethak would surrender their weapons and withdraw to their homeworld. But they would also receive human teachers, scientists, artists, and engineers who would help them develop their crystal technologies for peaceful purposes. As the session ended, species that had been bitter enemies for centuries found themselves discussing potential collaborations. Several Alliance engineers were already talking with Krethak delegates about using crystal resonance for space station construction. "You've changed more than just the Krethak today," High Chancellor Mira told Sarah privately. "You've changed how the entire galaxy thinks about warfare and peace." Sarah watched as Mike showed a Krethak delegate how to modify their crystal structure to create musical tones. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to show them how to be a friend. The galaxy was entering a new era. The species that had once threatened to conquer everything was learning to create instead of destroy. And it all started because humans, the supposed primitives, understood something the advanced races have forgotten. True strength lies not in being unbreakable, but in how you rebuild after being broken. 100 years had passed since the Crystal Rain. The grand concert hall on New Earth was packed with beings from across the galaxy. They had come to witness something extraordinary. The first performance of the Crystal Symphony Orchestra, featuring both human and Krethak musicians. Dr. Sarah Chen, now in her final years, sat in the front row. Her hair had turned white, but her eyes still sparkled with the same curiosity that had helped save the galaxy a century ago. Next to her sat Zixtal, the former supreme commander of the Krethak, his crystalline form now sculpted into elegant patterns that caught and reflected light in beautiful ways. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked her old enemy-turned-friend, gesturing at the stage where crystalline beings were tuning themselves to match the human instruments. "Never," Zixtal admitted, his voice creating gentle harmonics. "We thought our crystal nature made us perfect warriors. You showed us we could be artists instead." The lights dimmed, and the performance began. Human violinists played alongside Krethak, who had learned to vibrate their bodies at precise frequencies, creating music that would have been impossible for either species alone. The melody they produced brought tears to many eyes in the audience. In the century since the war, the Krethak had transformed their society. Their cities, once brutal fortresses of sharp crystal, were now sweeping works of art that sang in the wind. Their children were taught to create beauty instead of destruction, to build instead of break. The latest survey results came in. Sarah told Zixtal during the intermission. The Krethak are now the most requested architects in the Alliance. Everyone wants your crystal structures for their buildings. Zixtal's form rippled with pride. And to think we once used these abilities only for warships. Such a waste. The second half of the concert featured a new piece, composed jointly by human and Krethak musicians. It told the story of their peoples, the war, the discovery, and the peace that followed. When they reached the part about the crystal rain, the Krethak performers created a light show by refracting stage lights through their bodies. In the audience, young humans sat next to young Krethak, all of them born into a galaxy where their peoples had always been friends. They couldn't imagine it any other way. After the concert, Sarah stood with difficulty, aided by a cane made of Krethak crystal that hummed soothingly against her hand. A young crystalline being approached her, its form shifting through rainbow colors with excitement. "Dr. Chen, I'm studying Earth history. Is it true you defeated our entire species with construction equipment?" Sarah laughed. "That's not quite right. We didn't defeat you. We helped you evolve. Sometimes the best victory isn't destroying your enemy, but helping them become something better." The young Krethak considered this. "Our teachers say humans taught us that strength isn't about being unbreakable." "That's right." Sarah nodded. "True strength is about what you choose to become after you break. Look at your people now. You've turned what we thought was a weakness into your greatest gift." As they left the concert hall, the night sky was filled with the gentle singing of crystal buildings. In orbit, ships of all species docked at a space station built from Krethak crystal, its structure resonating with harmonious frequencies that welcomed visitors from across the galaxy. The primitives who had once been called in as a last resort were now celebrated not just for winning a war, but for winning a peace. They had proved that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't strength or technology, but the ability to see beyond victory to something greater, transformation.